Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Last week on the show, we dove deep into the process of remediating dependent or dysfunctional patterns of cannabis, and this week we're diving even deeper. When someone is able to establish a healthy relationship with cannabis, and one that is co-creative in nature, a whole new world emerges where cannabis now goes from a plant you use to numb out to a medicine and ally you utilize to connect deeper to your experience of life. And in this week's episode, we take you on a ride into what this looks like in our lives and in the lives of those we teach this to, some practical exercises you can take out and try for yourself, and much, much more. So please help me in welcoming back my man Alex Morningstar for episode 2 of our 3-episode series. Alex Morningstar, back for round 2, dude. I'm so excited for this, bro. And for everyone listening, like we said in the intro, you guys heard last week our full breakdown of cannabis dependency, what we're doing in our new course, Clarity, and how we look at addiction and all of these things a little bit differently, and really what our processes are, what our own stories have been within that realm. And this week, we get to dive into our second phase of our programs, which is Connect with Cannabis. And that's really where we start truly connecting with the plant, truly actually tuning in with it, discovering its ability as a spiritual aid and ally, discovering its ability as a personal and spiritual growth tool. And, you know, what I'd love to get into right at the bat, Al, is if you remember the first time that you connected with cannabis in an intentional manner as a personal and spiritual growth tool, when we were both getting into this stuff, if you remember either the first time or one time that stands out to you where cannabis really supported you, whether it was giving you ideas or, you know, anything like that, opening up new possibilities in your life. Let's dive into that, bro. Let's open it right up.
Yeah, wow. I don't know. I can say I remember the first time. I can remember many times. What I will say is I remember the first time I did an extended breathwork session. I was in San Diego at a retreat, and I came out of that breath session looking around at everybody, and it was like I had never seen reality in this way before, and my heart was so expanded, and I was like, I love these people. And I was like, is this what love feels like? Oh, my God. And I just was so blown away. And that is how connecting with cannabis intentionally, that's the type of thing it gives me access to. One experience really does stand out to me. It was with my partner, Jody, and we were going to go through one of the modules in our course and Connect with Cannabis. And we did the music module. We call this Listening with Cannabis. And I can just remember one of the most beautiful, it was like I was in a sea of love with my partner, and we were just swimming in the ocean of love. The music was creating just these waves and currents that we were surfing on and riding in. It gave me access to a way of experiencing reality that's not always my normal state. I guess that's something I would aspire to, is just to have that be my waking reality. Yeah. I can't say I'm there yet. But that is one that stands out to me very clearly.
Yeah, 100%, man. And, you know, guys, we really wanted to do this, you know, this part of the series. I mean, of course, we have 3 phases. We're going to do all of them, but we get really excited about Connect with Cannabis because it was our first course we created. And it was really right when I had broken my dependency, or what I thought was my dependency. I'd gotten clear on what those parts of me, like we talked about last week, were looking for. I had mediated between them, and I had really discovered what my dream was, or I had at least started to discover what it was. I had started to follow my heart again. And what I realized was that cannabis, as I was connecting with it now only on weekends, and I was making conscious intentions to go directly into my triggers, a lot of times what would happen is there'd be a polarity shift. Like, say if I had a trigger around an argument that Rachel and I got in, for instance, right? So I go into the experience, like, I want to figure out why I got triggered over what she said, right? And so, of course, right off the bat with that kind of intention, there's that party that comes forth that's like, oh my goodness, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be challenging, right? And yeah, it can be challenging to own up to certain shadow aspects of yourself that, maybe you were unaware of, or maybe, felt ostracized. So they spoke up and kind of got mad at whoever else was in the situation. But the other thing was that the golden shadow presented itself, right? And what I mean by that is that not only was I going into my shadow, which, for many of us, we think the shadow is dark, it's scary, it's all the things that we feel shame around and whatnot, but it's also all of the things that are the most divine aspects of ourselves, but maybe we haven't actualized yet. And so as I was going into these experiences with an intention like to explore a block that I felt with Rachel or whatever, I would illuminate what that block was. And a lot of times it was the block of like, hey, deep down, the reason you're getting triggered is because that it has nothing to do with her and it's everything to do with you. And so within that, what I would realize is, oh my goodness, it's all me, right? Like there's nothing in my environment that can ever trigger me, make me angry, etc., unless I somehow believe that about myself. And so I would have these huge epiphanies of like, oh my goodness, like when I get triggered, it's actually, I'm like very grateful for it. And that was when I really broke out of that victimhood I was living in from the business taking us over. Because even when I had taken my break, even when I got back into connecting on weekends, there was a little bit of resentment in me of like, man, that company ruined a good thing. But what I realized in that, as I explored that one time, was that, wait a minute, Ryan, you've been saying that you want to go off on your own and do something very unique and, live a different type of life. And you were pretty much going to be able to stay at that dispensary forever if they hadn't taken over. And if they hadn't taken over and they hadn't taken over in the way they did and literally messed up every single thing of the business, right? And done everything ass backwards to what I would have done it wouldn't have triggered me to the point where I was like, I got to leave here. I wouldn't have been able to find the strength because if I was comfortable there, all that like, well, I'm kind of comfortable. I could rise the ladder here, et cetera. So what I really realized was that I was able to use cannabis and utilize it to be able to flip the script on the belief systems, the stories that I was telling myself. And that's really what started a lot of what we do. When we went to, when we hosted our men's retreat, the BU Always retreat in 2021 in May, we had been working with Marcus Gurzy and a couple other mentors on building our first program. And you and I thought our first program was going to be a program called Be Your Own Guru, right? Traditional self-development program. Cool. Sounds cool. Fun name. But we had been having some challenges building it. And meanwhile, Marcus and Angelo and everyone helping us at that stage, they had all been around us enough to realize at that point that we were cannabis people, that we were going to do something with cannabis. But we hadn't realized it yet. I definitely hadn't realized it. You had asked me a couple of times, like, do you think we're like meant to do something with cannabis? And I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't even exist. I don't even know what that would look like, right? And I remember it was at the BU Always retreat that a lot of the men that came, most of the men, actually, I think all of them, had already experienced the only like cannabis ceremony that I had created at that point, which is kind of what Blistening turned into when we wrote the module later. But they had already experienced it. So all I knew was that I have all these guys here. I want to do a cannabis workshop, but they've already done the one that I typically do. So what am I going to do? So I just put cannabis workshop on the calendar. And I remember exactly where I was. I was out on that porch at the house we were staying at Martha's Vineyard with all the guys. And I was doing a 90-90 hip stretch. And it was about 5 minutes before the workshop started. And all of a sudden, poof, the idea got downloaded to me. And I had already experienced this, but I didn't have a context for what to call it. And it came out, the conversation with cannabis. And so I had this idea, right? In the sober state, write a letter to cannabis, own up to maybe anything that you want to own up to, and then connect with the plan and have cannabis through you write a letter back to you, And so I bring the guys through it. They all love it. And I had a couple of them come out to me after and like, dude, that was really cool. Like, what else can you do with cannabis? And that was kind of like the final straw where I was like, this is weird. Paul Chek, all these people I've looked up to, all these people that I really respect in my life, they're all really seeing something to do with cannabis with me. And I trust these individuals and I feel deep in my heart there is something I can do, but I don't know what that would look like. And so I remember, dude, I was on my deck and we were on the phone and I was drinking some cacao and connecting with a little bit of cannabis. And you had asked me, like, what if we are meant to build a cannabis program? And I finally entertained the idea. And literally in like 15, 20 minutes, we had the exoskeleton built for the original Connect with Cannabis. And so that was like a, wow, okay, this is really getting birthed through me. And when you think about, cannabis moving you from beta brainwaves into alpha and theta, we'll get into theta later, but alpha flow state, right? Like, so it just felt very flowy for me. It felt like, wow, this feels really good. And that's when I really started tapping into like, wow, this plant is really a spiritual aid and ally. like I had learned it could work that way in different ways. I learned it could help treat and cure cancer. I knew it could help with IBS and all the science end of it, all the medical end of it. But I had not actually seen it as like a spiritual aid and ally until around that time, which was probably about 6 months after I had gone through this initial break phase and really started shifting a lot of things in my life. And so it was really eye-opening for me, man, to really birth this idea of connecting with cannabis. And it's funny, man, because that name just came to us. And now there's so many people that will come to me and say, wow, I really like that idea of not using cannabis, but connecting with it, because language architects our reality. And so it was really cool, man, just traversing that kind of journey for us of how we started all of this, because that's where it all started, was connecting with it, or connecting with cannabis. And being able to bring so many groups through that program back when we had it as a group program, and having them really allow cannabis to rise into the conversation with other psychedelic medicines, and being able to understand the practicality of cannabis versus ayahuasca or things like that. And like I always say, I'm not down talking those medicines. I'm not here to make a hierarchy out of plant medicine. But for a lot of people, they don't have the ability to take a month off of their life and go to the jungle. They might not have a disposable $5,000. They might not know anyone who can get them mushrooms or LSD or even MDMA, but they probably have a dispensary around the corner, or a guy they've known since high school that sells it, right? And so the practicality of it, it's right around people all the time. And all we get to do now is teach them a couple of things like, hey, make an intention before you connect with that. Hey, what's your set and setting? How are you creating a ceremonial setting? And what do you want to do during that? What do you want to do with your stone, right? What do you want to really dive into? And have you sat in nature and really done these very simple things, right? Because again, if you go to people that are already consuming cannabis, maybe they're numbing out, etc., and you start to tell them they have to do all these crazy things to get it to work a different way, they're going to be like, fuck that, right? But if you're like, hey man, you ever taken 10 deep breaths when you're high? Hey, you ever you just looked at your flower and told it how you want to feel at the end? Even if they don't believe it, that's a very low barrier for entry, right? Like 10 breaths takes, 20, 30 seconds. And they're going to be able to see like, oh shit, that was different. Now they get a little curious. They're like, well, what happened if I do 20? What would happen if I do 30? What would happen if I go on YouTube and look up a holotropic breath session and I do that? Well, if that works, what about meditating? Well, what about taking a walk with my partner? What about sex, right? All of a sudden, this whole new realm comes alive that they didn't know existed before. And that's what we were teasing in last week's episode, that, guys, we're going to get into a lot of the juicy stuff we do in Connect with Cannabis, but I love diving into this stuff, man, and traversing that journey with you, because feels like yesterday, but it also feels like 10 years ago, bro. It was only 3 years ago. So it's pretty cool stuff, man.
Yeah, we've definitely been on a journey with cannabis.
Yeah.
And I can remember back to that retreat. We were hosting a men's retreat, and all of a sudden it basically turned into a cannabis retreat.
Mm-hmm.
All the workshops we had planned ended up being cannabis infused. I remember I did a yin yoga session at night with the guys, and like half of them were just stayed asleep right there on their yoga mat. It was at 9 p.m. or something like that. And It was a really beautiful experience. I remember that birthing as well. And I remember the months afterward where we were in this deep flow state and all this creativity was pouring out of us. And it was almost, we spoke about this a lot, how we felt like cannabis was like encouraging us and inspiring us and basically guiding us. Here's what to create. Here's what to write. Here's how it works. Here's how it works for you. Here's how it works for other people. And that was a really rich time in our lives for sure. Lots going on at that time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, dude, it literally was channeled. Like, I remember pacing back and forth on my deck, just having this stuff pour out of me. And then you being like, oh, we could do this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that fits there. And it was just like, boom. Like, literally, we had the exoskeleton built in like 30 minutes. It was crazy. And it took a little bit longer to build the full program because I wanted to put a lot of different stuff in there. But, it was amazing just to see how many people caught on to this. I mean, like, for me, I still have not fully tuned into the fact that I've shifted people like Aubrey Marcus's mindset around cannabis. That someone who had all the experiences you could ever imagine with plant medicine, right? Totally didn't like cannabis, had a lot of negative outlook on it based on the people that were using it around him. He was telling me a story about how he's like, dude, I don't know what you're doing with your cannabis and what you teach, but what you just showed me totally broke my story of what I thought a cannabis consumer to be. He's like, mostly when I see cannabis, he's like, I remember this one friend I had that, and this is Aubrey talking. He's like, I remember this one friend I had that I would always invite him to the after parties, right? When we were going from clubs or whatever. And he would always bring around a dab rig and just put everyone to bed. And I fucking hated it. So I stopped inviting him there. And I just kept thinking like, God, fucking cannabis just levels people. And what he realized in that moment was like, oh no, that's just the individual and their energy. He's giving dabs out because he wants to annihilate people, even if he's not consciously thinking about that, right? Like that's what he likes. So he's projecting that on others that's what they're going to like. But what's really going on is they're actually disconnecting. They're not connecting because there is a Goldilocks zone. Cannabis can be a dissociate, especially when high THC is in the picture. And good luck finding any cannabis in mainstream dispensaries these days that doesn't have a minimum of 20% THC. And so when you're looking into all this, the idea is how can I connect with this plant to actually tune into my life, go deeper into my life, connect more to the reality around me, the more with the reality within me, without just ending up on the couch completely dissociated, And that's a lot of what we do when we get into Connect with Cannabis is now we get into all the nitty gritty. We get into the science, we get into the medical, we get into the history, and we get into the spirituality. And we start really fine tuning the cannabis system that one has in their life, start fine tuning their holistic health principles, their diet, their exercise, their sleep patterns, these kind of things. And that's why I've always gotten so much excitement in teaching Connect with Cannabis, because for me, and this obviously, and we're both in this, like we're a lot more than just cannabis, right? Like, I love holistic health. I love spirituality. And I understand that no matter what we teach someone, if they're eating a terrible diet, if they're not drinking high quality spring water, if they're sleeping like terrible, if they're not using blue blockers at night, if they're eating all this junk food, all these things, no matter what we teach them, cannabis is never going to be able to help them to the level it could because they're not putting their end of the bargain in. For us, if we want to connect with any aspect of life, we want to live a high quality life, we must treat ourselves like royalty. That was one of the things the mystery school taught me that I really enjoyed through them is like in every moment, remind yourself that you are royalty. And this isn't like you're royalty and other people aren't. It's everything and everyone is royalty because everything and everyone is God. And so when you start diving into something like conscious cannabis, and you start getting really excited hearing Alex and I, or anyone that comes to Breathe with Cannabis or any of our programs talking about these incredible experiences they're having, I will tell you this, the only reason they're able to have those level of experiences is because they're doing work on the back end to make sure their vessel is purified and clean to be able to allow the medicine to work through them. And I think that's one of the big things we get into in Connect with Cannabis is really like starting to look at people's different patterns in life and starting to give them support when it comes to as Paul Chek would say, what does your 4-doctor system look like? Doctor diet, what are you eating? Doctor movement, how are you moving your body? Doctor quiet, how are you tuning out each day or tuning down every day, meditating, etc. And then also Doctor happy. What are you doing for yourself each day that really allows you to feel happy in life? Do you have a dream? Do you have a goal in life that you're really going for? Because those things are not only things that are important for cannabis to work in your system, but they're also important things to understand to give cannabis some runway to be able to help and support you. Because the whole idea of intention is, again, not just a random rule that we say you have to set an intention. It's not about just a checklist item, which I know can break some people's brains because I don't know about anyone else, but I was definitely a checklist person. I meditated today. Doesn't matter how good the meditation was. It was just nice to check it off the dopamine hit. But, the other thing too is when you're making an intention, you are taking everything, right? All potential, and you are cutting a line through all of that. And you are creating a line from which you and the plant are going to work within because you are the creator of your reality. The same way that if Alex came to me and he was a client and I was his coach, he would have to tell me what he's looking for me to be able to help support him. If he didn't, right? And Rachel and I joke about this all the time because every once in a while we'll get a client that does this, that shows up and just expects that you're going to have all the answers, right? And I'm like, no, I am no guru here, right? My job as a coach is to hear what you are looking for and support you in getting that goal and to make sure that you're not playing small or holding yourself back while you're doing it. And so the same applies for cannabis, right? We can't expect the plant to have all the answers for us, especially if we're not giving it anything to work with. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused, and it's no fault of theirs necessarily. I mean, none of us ever got a user manual for cannabis. We also never got a user manual for the human experience, right? A lot of things are asked backwards when it comes to how to live a highly optimized lifestyle. But at the end of the day, one of the most important things is to know why you're doing something in life, right? And so again, like we teased about in the last episode, what we're doing here is much more than just teaching you how to get high better with cannabis. Like that's like, the funny thing is when people get in there, they realize, holy shit, this is an entire life school, right? And cannabis happens to be the plant that we're optimizing our vessel for. First, we're getting our relationship figured out and getting rid of dysfunctional patterns. Then in phase 2, we're really owning our vessel and really getting our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being figured out so that now the plant can actually work with us to help us create the life of our dreams, and start to really get there. And we'll get more into that in phase 3 because I'm kind of, foreshadowing. But, we're really getting things figured out. We're learning how to connect with the plant. We're learning how to set intentions. We're learning different ceremonial structures. We're learning how to integrate. We're learning what to do after the experience is over. And only when you put those things together can you open up to what we're going to get into in phase 3 when it comes to healing and expanding and creating your vision and really just diving into the best experience of life you possibly can. Super cool.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of great things there. I'll start bouncing around with it. When it comes to experiencing reality, whether you think that you're a spiritual being in a physical vessel, or if you think you're a brain with a nervous system that's experiencing through sensory experience, the vessel is our filter of reality. So I love that you highlighted the importance of working with cannabis in a way where we want our computer, our vessel, our vehicle, we want it to be functioning so that it can pick up on what's going on in reality. And I agree with you that a lot of people look toward plant medicines as something that's just supposed to do the thing for them. Mushrooms are supposed to cure my PTSD. Mm-hmm. Ayahuasca is supposed to cure my addictions. But it really is a co-creative experience. You and I speak about dancing with cannabis. There's 2 partners dancing here. And priming the vessel is like getting ready for your date. You get dressed, you groom yourself, you hydrate. You're like, we're going to go dancing. I better be ready for this. And I do think that working on your vessel with love and care it's foundational to health, but it's also foundational to self-exploration. It's foundational to spiritual insight. And if people want to start to experience these things that maybe they hear on podcasts, like, how do I hear my intuition? How do I get in flow with reality? How do I surrender? I know for me, these were just sort of buzzwords that I couldn't quite connect to directly. But as you start to heal your system, what starts off as a flicker where you like kind of felt something, oh, the clock just said 11:11. That's interesting. But that sort of thing becomes a lot more visible to you, and you can start to feel these things that maybe you've read about or heard about. So yeah, priming the vessel, taking care of your health and well-being is super key as a foundational principle.
Yeah.
And then something else you spoke to is we're connecting with the plant to connect with different experiences of reality that maybe we haven't experienced yet. So, why would we connect with cannabis in an intentional way? It's because it can show us a new way of seeing. And we want to show up to that, to invite that with cannabis. Hey, show me how to see this differently. Show me how to feel this differently. Show me how to hear this music differently. It can be a helper to us. It can be a guide for us. It can be a dance partner for us to experience life in a new way. And something I want to stress there is it's not like you're going to smoke intentionally one time and you're like, I've got it all figured out now. But it can show us, it can demonstrate to us, hey, this is possible within your system. Your vessel is capable of this. And the more we experience that with cannabis in an intentional way, the more we can start to integrate those things into just the way we live our reality. So, for example, the feeling of being royalty that you touched on. When I smoke cannabis sometimes, and I do it in an intentional way, and I feel this wave, this long experience of just energy, insight, love energy, acceptance, surrender, I feel what it feels like to be royalty. I go, oh, this is what being royalty feels like. I'm safe. I know who I am. I accept myself. I accept my reality. Everything is just as it ought to be. That's what cannabis can open up for us, are these ways of seeing that we thought were not possible before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the opportunity to then learn to live that way, to start to notice my old patterns and programs. As a computer system, I saw and thought and operated in one way. After connecting with cannabis, I see that my computer, my vessel, is capable of operating a different way. And that's the game now for me, is I want more of that. But as we mentioned, I don't want to be dependent on cannabis to do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want cannabis to show me that, and then me do the work of starting to embody that and live that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly what we do, right? Like, we teach people how to not only have a PEAK peak experience of like, wow, I just had a Kundalini awakening or something like that, but then they go back to their shitty life after. That's not what we teach. What we teach is how to have, let's say, a Kundalini awakening or a new insight or an amazing new idea of what you want to do in life, and then actually be able to follow that as you get out of the experience and learn from the cues you're getting from the plant, and then follow that. And on your journey of following that, you'll start seeing positive reinforcement from the universe. You'll start seeing synchronicity, serendipity, etc., chance encounters, all of these wild things to tell you to keep going farther, right? You're getting warmer. You're getting warmer. And in the human experience, it's very easy for us to get boxed in and bogged down. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And even then, we don't really know it. So, like, let's use an example here, right? Let's say that someone, let's say a man, because we're men, let's say a man gets cheated on by a girl, and he then forms a belief that all women are cheaters and he's never going to find love, etc. So he's now got boxed into a reality, right? He has a story that's going along with it. He has an experience to back up the logic behind it, and that's what he believes. Well, if he connects with cannabis, right? And there's many other avenues that can do this. Not like cannabis is the only one, but I'm going to use it as an example. And let's say he connects with cannabis to explore this to a deeper degree, right? Maybe it's a little bit vague intention. Like, I'd want to explore this experience more. Well, maybe what happens during that experience, right? And we'll get more into this in phase 3, but maybe he heals that trauma, but potentially, and this is typically what happens, he gets a different perspective on it. So maybe what he realizes is, wow, you know, that girl that cheated on me, she was probably going through some weird shit too, you know, and he's not going to go out and be friends with her again. He's still going to have a boundary. He doesn't want a part of his life, but now he sees that one event from a different perspective, right? It's not just he was the victim and got cheated on. It's he's the victim and got cheated on, but he also doesn't take it personally now because the girl was just, you know, she was just having a challenging time. She was a hurt person, hurting people, right? That kind of stuff. And Ibrahim Karim from Biogeometry talks about this. To really understand something, you need to see it from 12 different perspectives. And so a lot of times what happens is we have an event that happens in life and, you know, we just see it from one angle, and then creates a very static and stagnant story on top of it. And when we can connect with something, whether it be a coach, whether it be a plant medicine, whether it be a meditative practice or breath work or whatever that thing is that allows us to see it from a different perspective, we're going to be able to open up our reality to new possibilities. And really, for me, a high quality life is a life full of possibility. Those things are synonymous with me. When you're a kid, everything is a possibility. You don't know if there's a boogeyman under the bed. You don't know if Santa Claus is real, right? Like, everything is a possibility. And I think as we go through the process of adulteration, right, we get adulterated, what starts happening is those possibilities unconsciously start getting closed off, right? It stops being from I can be anything to I'm going to be a psychologist, right? And then I'm not going to be any kind of psychologist. I'm going to be a child psychologist. So now everything I learn is going to be about child psychology. And I'm just using this as an example, but this is how it happens, right? Now, that's not necessarily bad in and of itself, but if we don't necessarily break out of those patterns, our life will be it could end up very bland. And this might not be the case for everyone, but I know that for me, for you, for people that typically resonate to us, that is the case, right? That they don't want this cookie cutter version of reality that life laid out for them, that society laid out for them, but they don't know what they don't know. And so when you connect with a plant medicine such as cannabis, all of a sudden you become aware of that which you did not know. Now, even though you became aware of it, you still don't know it, right? Because there is no objective reality, but you can see it from a different angle. And because of that, it opens up possibility. And what does possibility have within it? Curiosity, imagination, awe, and wonder. And when you look at the Bible, not that I'm a religious person, but I know a good line when I hear it, it states that if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must first enter the mind of a child. Now, when you look at cannabis and people that consume cannabis, even the classic stereotype of the lazy stoner, they're chilling on the couch, they're calm, they're cool, collected, they're laughing, they're curious, they're kind of like, asking silly questions maybe or whatever. Those are all very childlike qualities. Now, I'm not going to say that, that's the best expression of connecting with cannabis, because it's definitely not for me. But what I am saying is that for me personally, and maybe some of you guys listening or ladies listening can resonate, for me, it's very easy for me to get boxed into a system. Like if I'm home for too long without traveling, I start to get very regimented and very into my day-to-day, and the possibilities start shrinking. So one of the main things I utilize cannabis for, and one of the main things we teach, is to shake things up. Sometimes you don't have the ability to go on a vacation, or maybe you got a really strict work schedule, but you got one day a week where you can connect with cannabis and just laugh your ass off and just have a wild experience, maybe cry, do whatever you got to do to just shake things up, because stagnancy to me equals death. And so a big part of what we do in Connect with Cannabis is teach people different ways to utilize the plant. Because for us, when we were making the program, sure, guys, we could have done just a cannabis meditation course. But what happens if meditation is not right for someone? Because I don't believe anything's objective. So even though I'm a huge avid meditator, I believe in it. For someone else, breath work may be their meditation, or riding a bike, or, connecting with their romantic partner in a lovemaking session, whatever that is. So what we did in Connect with Cannabis was we laid out a buffet. Every single week, we're having them connect in ceremony with a different modality. So we go from the body scan and meditating and somatic experiencing into the conversation with cannabis and getting clear on journaling and parts work. Then we dive into limiting belief work. We dive into your ability to turn off and relax. We dive into listening and allowing music and cannabis to act as carrier waves for emotion. We dive into energy practices like Tai Chi and Qigong, breath work. We dive into goal setting and manifesting. We dive into connection, and we dive into the concept of the inner child. So that way, when people go through, they're able to say, wow, that one thing, I really love that. Or these three things I really loved. And that's what our clients have loved so much about it, is that, we don't, again, like we said in the first part, we don't tell anyone anything. We don't say these are the only things you can do. We just say, hey, be aware you can do literally anything with this plant. One of the things that we do at men's retreats that I think is the funniest thing ever is we do a inner child healing workshop, where we'll usually have that on the calendar. And so most men are expecting something pretty dense and pretty heavy. And then when they walk into the room, let's say there's 20 people there, there's 20 Nerf guns on the ground. And I have them connect with cannabis, pick a team, pick up a gun, and go shoot each other with Nerf guns. And you would be so surprised, everyone listening, how hilariously fun this is, and how much men come up to me every time and go, dude, I really needed that. I don't remember the last time I played like that. And just let all of my shit hang out. Didn't worry about, I'm a big fan of healing and inner child work and things like that. But for me, a lot of that stuff, when I know how heavy it is, there's a part of me that's just kind of can it be a little more fun, And so, again, it's not to diss other inner child healing modalities, just to show that there's so much ability to do this type of healing work, even without having to necessarily dive in and do a really deep somatic experiencing type thing. So there's so many different things we do with it. And I love talking about this stuff, man, because it's just so fun. And being able to teach people how to utilize the plant as a personal and spiritual growth tool is just a fucking blast, man. And I really feel like it's a returning home to what cannabis has been utilized for over 10,000 years. Many people don't know this plant has been around for literally millennia. I mean, we have an endocannabinoid system that just so happens to interact perfectly with the phytocannabinoids found in the cannabis plant. Imagine that. We have the largest regulatory system in our entire being, right? It controls everything from our nervous system to our appetite to our sexual arousal, everything that I mentioned in part one. And we have these endogenous cannabinoids, anandamide and 2-AG, that work on the CB1 and CB2 receptor sites. And it just so happens that the phytocannabinoids found in the cannabis plant, THC, CBD, etc., fit perfectly. Imagine a key that just so happens to fit in the same lock and twist it as the endogenous cannabinoids in our body. There's no way anyone can argue with me, or that I'll believe them, that we did not co-evolve with this plant and that it played an extremely pivotal role in our life. What role? I don't know. I don't pretend to know the entire thing, but the evidence is clear, in terms of having that system. So just really cool to dive into this stuff and really be able to red pill people when it comes to how pivotal cannabis has been in the journey of being a human and how much we've been led astray in the last 80 to 100 years for no other reason than vested interests, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. That's the only reason cannabis is legal, straight up. And we talk about a lot of that in Connect with Cannabis as well.
Yeah, I'm loving this so much to reflect on this. And what's standing out for me is just the visualization of a human as an energy structure. And when we get into the all work, no play mentality, that energy structure becomes more and more rigid and sticky. And our system can start to just follow with efficiency of doing the same things. That's when we get stuck in a rut. It's just starts to simplify things. You just start to repeat your patterns and you become stuck in this consistent thing. And for a lot of us, you and I especially, Ryan, we like novelty, we like adventure, we like creativity, and the same exact thing every day, day in and day out with no change or hope for a new future. That's like our definition of hell right there.
Yeah.
And so if we think of ourselves as this energy being and we have this balance of the masculine, feminine energy, I find masculine energy to be the structure and consistency that helps us survive, manifest our creativity, get stuff done. But I find in our culture, we have a very strong weight toward the masculinity side of hustle and grind culture, suppression of feelings and emotions, seriousness. And we can honor that side of us saying like, yeah, life throws a lot of like challenges at us. It's good to have a strong masculine that can deal with responsibility in life. But we get too far on that side of things, and all of a sudden we lose sight of why the masculine is showing up in the first place. And it's to hold space for those beautiful aspects that cannabis can help us reacquaint ourselves with: imagination, creativity, joy, sensuality. A lot of men in particular suffer from being disconnected from that side of things. Sex becomes another job to get done. Their job is a job to get done. And in fact, they find themselves with free time and they almost get overwhelmed going, what do I even do to nourish myself? I'm so in go mode at all times. If I even had 2 hours of freedom, I don't know what I would even do with that. And people can just get in a loop in their life where it becomes overly structured, overly stagnant, and they start to lose that glimmer of childlike awe of how beautiful reality really can be. So I love all the things you mentioned, and I love that is a big piece of what Connect with Cannabis does with people and for people all together in a community, is we're reconnecting to that side of ourselves that's sort of been stamped out by where our modern society has found itself. We can learn like, yes, there's dark things in the world. Yes, there's challenge, there's responsibility, but we're not just here to survive all of that onslaught. In fact, we are royalty. We're manifestors. We're creators. There's a lot we can do to have a spicy, fun reality, even with all those challenges. And the last thing I'll say here is like, there's a reason a lot of the jazz musicians smoked cannabis.
Yeah.
Okay. It's common to get out of balance with cannabis and have it be a little overwhelming, which we spoke to on the last episode. But it's clear that cannabis helps us tune into our creativity and ability to really express differently.
Yeah. Like think about classical music, which to me is like the least cannabis infused type music in existence. And then think about jazz, which is potentially the most cannabis influenced music out there. Obviously reggae and things like that, but you guys can understand the analogy. But, like when you think about even reggae or jazz or whatever, there's not really even a key they're playing in, right? They're kind of just going by ear and they're allowing intuition to guide them. And that is a very feminine quality. And I think that the main challenge that a lot of men run into, and potentially, I mean, I'm sure women run into this too, living in a very masculine dominant world, which is silly, but that's a conversation for another day. But one of the things we run into is that our mind starts becoming before our heart. And that's the challenge, right? I always say feminine energy needs to come before masculine energy, not in a hierarchy, But think about it like this, right? If you don't know what you want in your heart, what is your mind going to help you do? It's going to help you do whatever your programs and patterns are. And before you know it, you're going to wake up living a life that's not yours. You're going to wake up and be like, fuck, my dad wanted me to become a lawyer. I wanted to be a surf teacher and now I'm a lawyer. Fuck, what happened, right? Well, because you didn't tap into your heart and allow your heart to lead. Now, where the mind really comes in and what we teach in Connect with Cannabis is that when you understand what your heart wants, that's when your mind becomes your best friend. Because your mind, as long as it's defragged from any potential patterns and programs, and we do a lot of that too, but what it can do is actually help you achieve the goals coming from your heart. And that's why I tell everyone it's a 50-50 balance, right? But the heart needs to come before the mind to make sure that you're going to end up where you actually want to end up. And cannabis, in my opinion, is the best medicine to connect you deeply to your heart. I mean, MDMA, of course, but with MDMA, you have to be very careful surrounding a lot of different interactions with pharmaceuticals that some people are on. It is an amphetamine, right? There's obviously more risk involved with that. And a lot of people are not there yet. A lot of people, like you talk about like a 60 to 70-year-old woman that comes into the dispensary. If I try telling her about MDMA, she's going to remember hearing about ecstasy and how it put holes in your brain. And that's going to be it, and she's going to be like, this guy's full of shit, right? But if we teach them how to do that with a natural plant that grows from the ground, it's a lot easier to start converting people into understanding like, hey, this is a natural plant that grows in the earth, right? And that what they're trying to tell you is that somehow this plant that is from God that grows in the natural earth is somehow okay on one imaginary line, but not okay on another one. And it's for your health, like that's why we're keeping it illegal. And it's like, that is so ridiculously false, and I think that one of the best things, like you mentioned too, is what comes forth as a result of being able to connect with cannabis. And all of our names for our courses kind of have that double entendre to them in a way, right? Or kind of like double meaning, where you could say connecting with cannabis, right? Like connecting with it intentionally, but also connecting more to everything, mostly and firstly yourself in life with the aid of cannabis. And so once again, just like we said in part one, when we were saying that we're doing much more here than just focusing on the microcosm that is your relationship with cannabis. Well, when you get into Connect with Cannabis, we're looking at a lot more than just connecting with the cannabis plant. We're allowing you to connect with the cannabis plant to learn how to connect deeper with yourself, with those you love, with your mission, and with the world at large. Because when we think about loneliness, when we think about people polluting the earth, when we think about all the negative things we can think about, all of it goes back to a lack of connection. How can you poison the earth when you realize the earth is also you? How can you hate someone else when you realize they are just you in a different skin tone, living a different life, right? How can you hate anything in life when you realize that everything is also you? You can't, right? Unless you're going to be very distorted, right? And live a very challenging life. And so that's what we're doing here, is that there are endless rivers that lead to the same sea. And our river that we teach is how to do this through the medicine of cannabis, the same way that our ancestors have for over 10,000 years. And like we say all the time, cannabis is not for everyone, right? It's not everyone's plant. The same way that I love blueberry smoothies. I just had one. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people don't like blueberries. Does that mean blueberries are better or worse? No, it just means that for one person's experience, they're not right for them. In my experience, they happen to be right for me. So that's what I tell everyone. Like, we are speaking to deep existential truths here with regards to what it takes to live a high quality life, or shameless plug, a highly optimized life. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know why you're here, if you don't have a way to understand who and what you are, then you're going to suffer greatly, because you're going to think that you're separate from everything. You're going to think that everyone else is different than you, that other people can get there, but you can't. All of these things that completely get annihilated when you start connecting with a plant medicine intentionally, that can bring you deeper into the truths of the universe. And that's really what it's doing. It's expanding your nervous system. And this is why, again, we talked about in part one, there is no right or wrong answer. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit now too, because I have a new way to capitulate it. But what we're really doing with cannabis is we're stretching our zone of reality, right? And some people could say in a scientific way, we're stretching our nervous system's ability to handle stress over time. We're stretching our ability to withstand more in life, right? And as we do that, There may be someone whose nervous system is already really upregulated that can only handle once a week, or it's just going to be a detriment in their system. There could be someone that can handle every day. But what we're doing is we're expanding your possibilities in life. We're expanding your reality so that the way we teach it, right, is not just simply like go connect with cannabis and cool, you saw something awesome and now go back to your shitty life. It's like, no, how can you follow those threads like we talked about before to be able to live an expanded state of reality even without the medicine? And that's why this podcast, right, this One Time on Psychedelics is a very similar type of mission, right? It's not just to talk about how psychedelics are awesome and you can trip all the time and see cool stuff. It's like, no. Realize these medicines, including cannabis, are here to only show you what is already possible beyond your current belief systems, your stories, your life experience, etc. And then follow that cue so that you can start going from PEAK, whoa, I just tripped balls or had a crazy cannabis experience, to a PEEK experience where, whoa, I was completely sober and I just had something that blew my fucking mind that I can't explain. And I'll give you an example. So when we were at Confluence, right? So I'll back up a little bit. So the last 4 years for me has really been me connecting with cannabis, visualizing my future, working with the plant to really create everything that everyone sees me do today. Alex was with me back before I had really anything going, like literally anything. I was just a guy that grew cannabis and went around to retreats. That was it. And so I've spent the last 3-4 years with Alex architecting all of this stuff. And when I went to Confluence this year, there was 2 different festivals happening for the Eclipse. And I was dead set on going to the Eclipse Festival, like the big one. I went in 2017 out in Oregon, in your neck of the woods, Alex. And it was chaos, but I enjoy a little bit of chaos, right? Once again, tossing things up and throwing things up and inviting some curiosity into life. And so in December, I go to Austin. I'm staying with Aaron Abke, and we do 3 Breathe with Cannabis workshops, me, him, and Chris. We do one Friday at Aaron's house. We do one Saturday at Daniel Raphael's house. And we do one Sunday at Third Eye Meditation Lounge. So the first event we did was at Aaron's house. And it was kind of just like a free event for our homies and like very cool people in Austin that we really wanted to experience this. And one of the guys that came was named Alex Zek. And I had never met Alec before, but we hit it off right away. And at the end of the event, he was like, dude, you guys need to do this at my music festival. He's like, I'm throwing a festival for the Eclipse. It's called Confluence. And in that moment, I just felt in my heart, because I know what my heart feels like now with the help of cannabis. I was like, that's a yes. That's a fuck yes. And so I decided in that moment, we're going to this festival. Now, as we're getting closer to the festival, this was in December that I was there, and the festival was in April. As we're getting closer, I start hearing a lot of my friends being like, dude, you going to the Eclipse Festival? And I'm like, nah, I'm going to Confluence. And there was a little bit of FOMO in me, right? There was a little bit of like, did I make the right decision, right? My brain was getting in the way. But every time I tapped back into it with the help of cannabis or meditating, etc., it was like, nah, man, I'm excited for Confluence. So we end up going to Confluence. And when we get there, immediately I knew like, this is exactly where I parked my car. First of all, like all the coolest people are there. It's a smaller festival. It's on a regenerative farm. The farm's name is Sovereignty Ranch, which, Al, you and I are deep in the sovereignty space now. So everything was like, yes, 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 right? Synchronicity. Then what happens is we start having some really wild synchronicities happen there, all of us. So one day we're in the mineral pool, and there's these 2 guys, James and this guy, Rel. And they're talking, they had never met before, and they're just shooting the shit. And they discover they were both born on November 3rd. And we're in Austin when this hour, outside of Austin. They're both born on November 3rd, same year, almost the same time, in the same city and in the same hospital, right? So they're just like, what the fuck? And they're like having like a, oh my God moment. And this guy, who's also in the mineral pool, kind of wanders over and he's like, what are you guys yelling about? And James just looks at him all giddy and he's like, I don't imagine your birthday's November 3rd. And the guy just kind of looks at him like a deer in headlights and is like, dude, my birthday is November 3rd. How did you know that? And they're like, oh my God, right? So again, these are the things that I take meaning to mean that you are on the right path. Keep going. Warmer, warmer, warmer. Then when we were also at Confluence, there's obviously food there. And when you got food and ordered food, they would give you like a little like metal thing with a number on the top. And there's like 250 people here. There's like 100 different numbers they have. And I wasn't even paying attention. I'd be talking to people online, ordering my coffee or whatever. And all of a sudden I got 44. I'm like, whoa, 44. That's cool. The next time I get 44. The next time I get 44. The next time I get 44. And then I get 44 a 5th time in a row. Literally in a row. And the next number I get was not 44, but it was 28. And I'm born on the 28th of March. And I was celebrating my birthday down in Austin with Aaron, who's on the 30th, and my buddy Ty, who's on the 4th. And so many of those kind of things happened there. Like, it was so many that even Aaron was like, dude, like, we got to start writing these down. I've never seen something like this happen before. And so I really believe that, again, we didn't need cannabis to get to Confluence or any of that. Cannabis gave me that, right after Breathe with Cannabis, that feeling of like yes in my heart. And I trusted that, had faith in it. And I ended up in the exact right place with the exact right people. And I'm not going to talk down on the other festival. But what happened was a really severe weather came into Texas. And the other festival, the morning of the eclipse, I just got a random ping in line one day when I was waiting for my coffee. I was like, oh, I wonder what's happening to the other festival. I look it up. Eclipse Festival canceled morning of the eclipse due to inclement weather. And now I start looking at the radar map. So imagine we're here and the Eclipse Festival is like right here. So there's bad weather all over here. And somehow it just wasn't right there. Like, literally, we had a beautiful day, saw the eclipse while the rest of Texas is going through tornadoes and thunderstorms and all this crazy shit. So I'm not going to say that I know for sure that, like, oh, we went there and, it was totally a whole thing or whatever, but I believe that. But I believe it, and again, there's no way to know for sure. But, again, like, those are the types of things that we help people tap into and connect with cannabis. Like, how do you follow your heart? And then once you get the cue, very similar to working with a coach, you don't just worship the coach and hang out with the coach all day. The coach wants you to go out there and prosper and go create your life. And the coach is there if you have some questions or whatever. But again, at the end of the day, if you just stay attached to the coach and think the coach is your guru, you're never going to get anywhere in life because you're missing it. You're mistaking the finger that points at the moon or sun as the moon or sun, when in reality, cannabis, coaches, etc., all they can do is point you in a direction, but you have to go there and follow it. And I think that's what I'm so excited about with Connect with Cannabis and what we've done in the last 3 years with it, is that we have had hundreds of people that have been able to tap into that for themselves, leave their jobs, find new romantic partners, go online and make themselves more visible online. Because when you start diving into all this stuff and you start connecting with cannabis as a spiritual aid and ally, you start diving into your basic human needs, right? Do I have a fear of being seen and heard? Do I have a fear of not being safe, right? All these things. And when you're in community, you can start realizing like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not alone here. I'm not the only one that has a fear around being seen and heard. I mean, fuck, I have one of those, right? And a big part of what cannabis shows you is that, or at least what it's shown me, is that it's not about pile driving that fear into the ground and never feeling it, right? Like David Goggins would say. It's about loving it and realizing that any fear you have, any challenge you have, is actually one of the best things that can help you connect in your life to more people and more aspects of the earth. Because even though our challenges may look different, we all go through challenges. And if I share with people that I have a fear of being seen and heard, that doing podcasts makes butterflies come up in me, that standing on stage makes me terrified, but yet they see me do it anyway, now they're going to have the inspiration to be able to say, you know what? I don't have to not have this fear to be able to go do that thing. And that's what cannabis has shown me over and over again, is that, dude, your greatest adversaries are actually your best friends, in a lot of ways. Like, the things that you think are going to break the camel's back or hold you back can actually be the things that propel you forward. And the example I always use is Eminem at the end of 8 Mile, right? Like, that's what cannabis really did for me, is allow me to own all of me and go, yeah, I do get scared when I go on stage. Yeah, podcasting does give me butterflies. But you know what? My mission is way more important to allow me to, really not step into my full role as a human being, right? As a divine being having a human experience. My mission in this world, all of our missions in this world, all of our incredibly beautiful and unique missions are worth way more than letting ourselves just stay with the story that because we have anxiety or we experience anxiety, that we can't go do any of these things. And that is really what cannabis has done for me, man. It's pretty cool to think about it.
Yeah, we're reconnecting with human technology that we were led to believe doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
You just laid out magical stories that people would go, no, but you experience it and you're like, yeah, I was there. It happened. And that's how I look at this, is we're really reconnecting with parts of our possibility that our upbringing, the media, our culture has sort of boxed us in to believe aren't possible. And you start to feel your heart in a new way that you never thought was possible, and you see it is possible. And you start to behave in a way you never thought was possible. And you see, wow, the universe, other people, my life circumstances, they they send that energy back to me when I start putting it out in the world. And you start to see how this stuff really works. And what I'd love to finish my thought weave with is we're going to speak about this in the next podcast we do together. There's sort of two camps from what I've seen in the whole self-help, self-healing space. There's one camp that's it needs to be evidence-based and it needs to be clinically proven and this many milligrams and this double-blind study. And if it's not that, and atheism, blah, blah, blah. And there's like this super hardline materialist approach to how we're supposed to navigate. And then on the other end of that spectrum might be someone you'd look at and you're like, this cat is ungrounded. I don't know if I can trust what this woo-woo crazy person is saying. And something that you and I both really value and appreciate is finding the middle ground in that axis. You know, everything in Connect with Cannabis and the way we operate is in alignment with standard psychological principles. You know, when you Google what is therapy supposed to do, which is an interesting question, a lot of therapists will tell you, well, we're guiding people back to wholeness. And even from the spiritual side, people say, you know, self-actualization, you know, spiritualizing the body. And all these different systems are speaking to a similar life journey that humans are undertaking. And it's reclaiming those exiled parts of ourselves to feel more expressed in our life path. And to me, that's what Connect with Cannabis is all about, is it's reteaching us that human capacity we have to fully embody ourselves. So I wanted to highlight that in our program, we are doing evidence-backed experiences that are also part of spiritual lineages. They're everyday things that are tapped into with a new paradigm. And it's stuff that really does bring you in line with some of your human powers and bring you back to wholeness within yourself. And what I'm excited about in the next episode is so we talked about breaking dependency. In this episode, we talked about what is it like to start reconnecting to who we are with cannabis. In the next episode, we're going to dive really deep into what is the spiritual journey like? What is healing versus evolving? What is, we're going to go in. So I'm really excited about it. So I'll wrap up there. And this has been a great show with you, Ryan. So back to you.
100%, man. Yeah, you said it perfectly. You know, I don't think there's anything else I could say there. I mean, one thing that came into mind was another example of this like possibility thing that's near and dear to my heart that maybe some of you listening have heard before, if you've heard me on podcasts, is the story of my dad. When my dad got sick, I had a lot of beliefs around what someone I loved dying from cancer was going to be like. And when I went through that experience with the support of cannabis, all of a sudden, the whole idea of death got turned completely upside down for me. You know, and my father was actually the one who did this for me and showed me this, because he started talking about death as a celebration, as something he was excited to explore, as like another chapter to an endless story that he doesn't know what the story is, where he's going, where he's been, et cetera, but he's just excited about it, you know? And so for me, that experience really showed me so many different aspects that I've been able to integrate into my reality. And now when people close to me are sick or pass away, you know, relatives, things like that. I just had my last uncle on my dad's side pass away. You know, of course, my humanness hurts for that, right? And I allow for that. But the divine part of me, the infinite part of me knows like, oh man, you're riding the fucking lightning right now and you're having a blast, you know, and keep an eye out for me. Make sure I don't get into any too much trouble down here, but allow me to have a lot of fun and check out all the stuff I'm going to do in this lifetime. So I'm going to give you a good show, you know? And so it's such a different way to look at, in this example, death. And that's what I've been doing with cannabis. That's what we've been doing with cannabis for many years now, is just continually stretching how we think about everything. And again, that doesn't mean that, you know, tomorrow everything could change, right? Like I leave literally everything up to that, because at the end of the day, you know, like I said in the first episode, to me, stagnancy is synonymous with death. You know, I want to be continually becoming and never having become, because the second I say I've reached the goal is death. You know, I want to keep going. And cannabis reminds me over and over again that I can really find solace and meaning in the process of cyclically becoming and in the process of the journey. You know, that's the main thing I think that cannabis has taught me in life, is that it really is about the journey. You know, we've heard this a million times. It's not any new information. But for me, intellectually understanding that it's about the journey, not the destination, and having the experience of that are two totally different things. And with my father and the other experiences I've talked about, those things have really allowed me to enjoy the journey that much more. So, dude, it's been a blast having you on again, man. I'm so excited to dive in for part 3. You guys at home, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you loved the episode, of course, as always, leave us a 5-star review. We dare you. And wherever you are in the world, guys, we hope you are having the best day of your entire life. We'll be back next week for part 3. And until then, may the force be with you to infinity and beyond, everybody. Peace.